Here are the final upgrades for my Dell Precision desktop. I got another Xeon. I'm upgrading the RAM to 32 gigs, and I'm using the extra 16 I have in combination with this to give it about 41 gigs of RAM, and I got a heatsink for the new CPU. So with that said, I'm going to let my phone charge, and then I'm going to come back and do these upgrades. Alright, just like last time, you can't see the new CPU, but it's in there now. And I also added in the RAM. When it comes to the way I have everything set up, 8 gigs, 8 gigs, then the 4 gig, and the 4 gig here. Same thing on the other one right here. So if I did my math correct, I should have 41 gigs of RAM to work with, which is more than enough for me when it comes to this computer. The only reason why I'm doing this is because doing this upgrade is so incredibly cheap, and I have the ability to do so, so why not do it? So the next step for me to do is get thermal paste applied, put the cooler on, reattach the side panel, and plug everything back in and see if the thing boots up. It should, so I'll come back in a bit. Alright, CPU is installed, covers are installed. So the next step for me to do is put it back where it came from. So I'm going to get everything reconnected and come back. Alright, time to see if this thing fires up again. It should. Power cycling. Alright, so just like the last video, I'll let this sit for a while until it displays an image. It took a little while, but it's now finally displaying an image. So it looks like it's going to boot directly into Windows, so I'll just let it sit for a little while longer. It has to readjust itself because it's running 2 CPUs and more RAM and whatnot. Alright, so the system now has changed, so that's totally fine. That's fine, so I'll just hit F1 again, so it'll reboot. And since it seems to be displaying an image, I'll just come back when it actually gets to Windows. Alright, I'm now at Windows, and both processors are fully showing up as it should. I now have 24 cores, 48 threads. This is the most amount of cores and most amount of threads I've ever had on a system. With that said, this computer here does not beat my main rig, but with that said, since these upgrades again were so cheap, I went for it anyways. And I actually have 48 gigs of RAM instead of 41 I initially thought. And I can even add more down the road if I ever want to. So with that said, I guess the next step for me to do is to see if I have any extra gaming performance. I highly doubt it, so let me load up a game and see what happens. Well, I can say one thing is certain, Hogwarts Legacy does not like a dual socket CPU setup. It took a real long time to get to this preparing shader compilation again. I don't know why it does this every single time. It shouldn't have to recompile shaders after it did it once. This is the only game that does it, and it's a little annoying. It seems like with Hogwarts Legacy, I've actually kind of downgraded my performance. I'm not getting that near 60 FPS like I was originally, which is actually kind of impressive. With that said though, the one game I really care about is Sea of Thieves for this system, so hopefully Sea of Thieves performs pretty well. I want to say maybe I'm having a performance uplift maybe, I don't know. But it seems to be able to maintain itself just fine. It's still going to stutter from time to time because it is still an older system. But it seems like at least with Sea of Thieves I may have actually increased performance, or it's basically the same. I expect to stay the same because I'm just adding another processor, and as far as I know, computer games like this are not really designed to handle 2 socket systems like this, so they just go to core 0. But it seems like Hogwarts Legacy was actually going to core 1, which is the CPU I just added. So with that said, when it comes to actual temperatures though, it seems like core 1 is or CPU 1 is running a little harder than I would like. I need to see if the mounting pressure is wrong on it, or if I did something wrong. So I'm gonna pull this out again and see what happens. Okay, I just figured out what's going on. CPU fan 2, which is for the C-Sync here, is not spinning up at all. Like for instance, if I touch the cover right here, it's putting out quite a bit of heat, and all I'm doing is idling in the BIOS. Now if I touch the cover on this one right here, which is the first CPU, it is warm, but it's not hot. And if I touch the actual heatsink, it's warm, but this one right here is really, really hot. So I don't know what's going on. I should have fans, or the fan should be working, and I have it plugged into CPU fan header 1, which you really can't see because the iPhone's refusing to autofocus properly. But I have it plugged into the right port. Why the fan's not working is beyond me. And here's the actual board itself on Dell's website. And here's number 9. And if I go to number 9, CPU 2 fan controller, which I have it plugged in, but it's not doing anything. So I'm going to grab some of my other Dell fans I have laying around the house and see what happens with those fans. Alright, got a fan plugged in. This is an Dell fan. So let's see what happens when I turn on the computer. Okay, so this fan here does in fact spin. So now what I need to do is I need to pull the fan that's in the cooler here and see if it spins also. Because it feels like this thing's not getting proper cooling. Because I think that's half of the issues I was having with the with games and whatnot. Because I was noticing the computer was kind of locking up from time to time. The thermal paste application was absolutely fantastic. And considering how hot the CPU cooler is, I think it is safe to say the fan on this one is busted. Alright, so I got the trial taken apart. I'm going to see if the fan spins. Interesting, it actually does spin, so why was it acting like it wasn't? Because it was really, really hot. Okay, it's not even wanting to shut off. I'm going to have to pull the cable. Alright, I don't know what was actually wrong with that cooler. Maybe the fan was being on the fritz. I think what I'm going to do is I'm eventually going to swap out the fans on this thing for Noctuas and just get a little 5-pin to 4-pin adapter. The fans on this thing I believe are 80 mil, so I can just get 2 80 mil Noctuas, swap them out, and I should have better cooling. But for the time being, what I've done is I set the front fans to 20%. The thing's a little more noisier than I would like, but temperatures are maintaining themselves a lot more nicely. And I think maybe the second processor actually runs a tad bit more hard than the first one. So I may end up just swapping the processors out also too. But for the time being, that's how I'm going to have everything set up. So I'm going to put this thing back in its hole and I'm going to see what happens with performance and whatnot. It should more or less stay the same. Alright, this time around, Hogwarts Legacy did not take that long to boot up. So I am thinking there was some type of fan issue with that heatsink. So eventually I am going to swap it out for a Noctua. But for the time being, it seems to be working. But as you noticed, CPU 1 is basically being just sitting. That means Hogwarts Legacy is using using the new CPU I added. And it loaded up significantly quicker. Now that said, the frame rate seems to more or less be about the same. Actually, no. It seems to be about the same, give or take. Again, I'm running this game on a pretty old system, but the frame rate definitely seems to be a little more stabilized than when I last tried to run this. Temperatures though, which you really can't see, they were maxing around like 140, 150. Now they're idling in the hundreds. So clearly there was something wrong with that cooler. So either way, I have improved the actual performance. I don't know if pulling the cooler out, messing with the wiring, and then putting it back together was what fixed it, or if me bumping the fans in the front to 20% resolved the issue. But it seems to be performing a lot more better now. And Sea of Thieves is more or less the same. It seems to be map dependent on performance and frame rate, which is to be expected. It would be nice if they'll be able to drop the base consoles and let this game really shine on newer generations. That way so we can actually get bigger maps, or a bigger map in general, and more player count, more ships and whatnot. Hopefully Rare will eventually drop the base Xbox ones, but only time will tell. With that said, temperatures are still well within reason. Again, you really can't see it, but they're like in the 80s and 90s for the second core, which is actually the one being utilized more than the first. So it seems that everything's in more or less good working order now. I don't seem to be having any of those weird temperature spikes I was having originally, which is good. Alright, so I've been playing some Sea of Thieves for a while, and frame rate and whatnot has more or less been the same for what this computer is. I still had the occasional stuttering and whatnot, which is actually a godsend for me. If I have stuttering in this game, that usually means there is a boat close. And when there's a boat close, I'm able to get my crap and run instead of just sitting on the island looking like an idiot as some asshole comes in and takes all my stuff I actually spent a hard time working on because they're unskilled and lazy. Speaking of, there is a brig right here. There's a galley over here, so it's going to be real interesting in a bit. Temperatures are... again, you really can't see it, but they're in the 110s now, which is more than adequate. Obviously, CPU number 1 is not being utilized, while CPU number 2 is being utilized. So again, it's working completely fine. So I'm going to probably die here and just go to a different session. Take that back, it's just a scaly boat. Alright, done playing Sea of Thieves for a little while. I forgot I am not using a captain chest or ship, and I don't really care about slowing this loot since I already have like 2 mil something. So I'm just going to quit the game and come back a little later. But before I finish off this video, I want to see if I can actually quit Sea of Thieves and actually have it close. Because that was an issue I had recently where I went to quit Sea of Thieves. It wouldn't actually quit. Luckily though, that time it actually quit. So I don't know why it wouldn't let me quit the first time, but whatever. So I think with that said, the updates are now complete. I will eventually be swapping out all the fans in the actual computer itself with Noctua fans, but that won't happen for a while.